Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to Soul Stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to join our family. Stay with us, because a new love story is about to begin. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a dust-covered rider who looked more ghost than man. Silas Boon had been sitting on his porch for nearly an hour, watching the sun climb over the distant mountains and paint the Wyoming sky in shades of pink and gold. His coffee had gone cold in his hands, but he did not notice. Mornings were the hardest part of living alone. The silence pressed against him like a physical weight, reminding him of all the years that had passed since anyone had shared this view with him. At 42 years old, Silas Boon had made peace with solitude, or at least he had convinced himself he had. The ranch stretched out before him, 400 acres of hard-won earth that his hands had shaped from wilderness into something resembling a home. Every fence post bore the memory of his labor. Every stone in the chimney had been carried by his shoulders. He had built this place from nothing, and he had built it alone. The rider swayed in his saddle as he approached, clearly exhausted from a long journey. Mail rarely reached this far from Willow Creek. When it did, it usually meant trouble or death. Silas set down his mug and stood, his broad frame casting a long shadow across the weathered boards of the porch. The envelope was thick, sealed with melted wax that bore no insignia, but the handwriting was instantly familiar. Jeremiah Wall, his old army brother, the only man left alive who knew all the things Silas wished he could forget. They had fought side by side during the war, had watched friends die in muddy fields and burning towns. Afterward, when peace came but peace of mind did not, they had drifted apart. Jeremiah had found religion and a wife. Silas had found a rifle and a reputation as a bounty hunter. He waited until the rider disappeared over the ridge before breaking the seal. The Wyoming sun burned hot overhead, and a lone hawk screamed somewhere in the endless blue as Silas read the letter once, then again, then a third time. Clara May Henderson, 23 years old, a minister's daughter, a widow from Missouri, educated, quiet, and needing a husband and a place to disappear. Jeremiah had written plainly, without sentiment or persuasion. She'll be on the stage through Cheyenne on the 15th. If you're there, she's yours. If not, she rides west to California. Silas, stop punishing yourself. You're a decent man, better than most. A mail-order bride. Silas let the letter fall against his knee. The weight of those few pages felt heavier than any rifle he had ever carried. His mother, God rest her soul, had begged him to find a wife before she died. Even wolves run in packs, she had whispered between painful breaths during those final terrible days. He had held her hand and made promises he never intended to keep. Now, here he was, 12 days from a decision that could change everything. The problem was simple. Silas Boon did not believe he deserved a wife, not after the war, not after the bounty hunting, not after all the men who never got back up when his gun was drawn. His hands were stained with blood that no amount of scrubbing would ever clean. What kind of husband could he be to any woman, let alone a minister's daughter? But nights were cold, and silence had a way of cutting deeper than bullets. 2 weeks later, he found himself standing on the Cheyenne stage platform in his only good shirt. His beard was trimmed close to his jaw, and he had knocked the dust from his hat until it almost looked respectable. He had even paid 2 bits for a bath at the hotel, something he only did for funerals or court appearances. The station swarmed with travelers. Soldiers headed to Fort Russell marched past in dusty blue uniforms. Miners chased rumors of silver strikes with pickaxes strapped to their backs. Painted ladies scanned the crowds for lonely pockets and lonelier hearts. Silas ignored the stares aimed at his scars and broad shoulders. He kept watching the road. The stage was late. Stages were always late. Too many things could go wrong out here. Broken wheels, bandits, raids by desperate men with nothing left to lose. Silas tried not to imagine burned-out wagons or shallow graves marked by sad little piles of stones. He had seen too many of both to pretend such things did not happen. When the stage finally rattled into view, white with alkali dust and pulled by sweating horses, Silas felt the world slow around him. Passengers climbed down one by one. A cavalry officer with polished boots and an arrogant stride. 2 miners arguing about claim rights before their feet touched the ground. An elderly woman in widow's black who clutched a rosary as if the beads might protect her from the wildness of this country. And then, last of all, a slight figure in a brown traveling dress. She stepped down carefully as if the world might shift beneath her boots at any moment. Dust clung to her hem, to her hair, even to her eyelashes. But she carried herself with a quiet dignity that made everything else fall away. The noise of the station faded. The heat of the sun dimmed. There was only her, Clara Henderson. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, twisted into a bun that had lost half its battle along the trail. Loose strands framed her face, softening features that might otherwise have seemed too sharp, and her eyes, green as sage after rain, met his with a shy weariness that punched something loose inside his chest. Silas removed his hat. He suddenly felt too big and too rough for this moment. His hands, scarred and callous from decades of hard work, seemed clumsy and dangerous compared to the delicate woman before him. "Miss Henderson," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Yes." Her reply was soft but steady. "Mr. Boon? That's right." He reached for her carpet bag, and she hesitated only a small second before letting it go. The bag was heavier than it looked, heavy enough to hide secrets. Silas wondered what a minister's daughter might carry that weighed so much, but he did not ask. Questions would come later if they came at all. "How was your journey?" "Long." A faint smile touched her mouth. "But I have had worse." There was a story in that smile. He could see it in the shadows beneath her eyes, in the careful way she held her shoulders, in the slight tremor of her hands. This woman had known hardship, she had known fear, and yet here she stood, 3,000 miles from everything she had ever known, willing to marry a stranger rather than face whatever waited behind her. He led her toward the Regent Hotel, every step feeling like he was carrying both of their pasts. The weight should have been unbearable. Instead, it felt almost natural, as if he had been waiting his whole life to share it. "I thought you might want to rest before tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow?" She echoed the word without emotion. "Yes, I suppose tomorrow we will be married." She said it calmly, as if discussing the weather or the price of flour. Most women would have been flustered or embarrassed by such a bold statement. But Clara Henderson was neither. She understood what this arrangement was. 2 broken people, too tired of running to lie anymore. Silas cleared his throat. "I am not much for speeches," he said, "but I will do right by you. You will have a home, food, protection. I do not drink overmuch. I do not gamble. I have never raised a hand to a woman." "Shh." He stopped walking. Those green eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if she could see straight through his skin to the scars hidden beneath. "And what do you want from me, Mr. Boon?" The question struck him like a hand around his heart. What did he want? Company? A warm meal at the end of a long day? A voice to fill the silence that echoed through his empty house? A reason to stop waking every night, haunted by the faces of men he had killed? None of those answers seemed right. None of them captured the hollow ache that had lived inside him for so many years. "Honestly," he said, meeting her eyes, "I do not rightly know. I suppose I am tired of talking to cattle. Tired of eating my own cooking. Tired of waking up to nothing but wind." Something in her face softened. Not much, just enough for him to notice. "That is the first honest thing I have heard from a man in years," she whispered. In that moment, something fragile and dangerous sparked between them. Silas did not touch her. He did not dare. Tomorrow they would stand before a judge and become husband and wife. But tonight, this quiet walk through dusty streets, this shy woman with secrets in her bag and sorrow in her eyes, felt like the beginning of something he did not yet have a name for. The wedding ceremony lasted barely 5 minutes. No flowers, no guests, no music. Just two souls who had lived through too much, agreeing to walk forward together. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Clara lifted her eyes to Silas with an expression he could not quite read. Hope, perhaps, or fear, or some mixture of both. The ride back to the ranch took most of the day. They traveled in comfortable silence, watching the prairie roll past like a sea of golden grass. Occasionally, Clara would ask a question about the land or the livestock, and Silas would answer in his usual brief manner. But there was no awkwardness between them, only the quiet understanding of two people who had learned to find peace in stillness. When the ranch finally came into view, Silas felt a strange flutter in his chest. He had built this place with his own hands, had poured his blood and sweat into every board and beam, but he had never truly thought of it as a home. It had always been a shelter, a fortress against a world that had given him nothing but pain. Now, looking at it through Clara's eyes, he saw something different. He saw possibility. The first weeks passed in a careful dance of kindness and caution. Clara cleaned the house with quiet determination, bringing order to the chaos Silas had allowed to accumulate over years of bachelor living. She cooked meals that made him forget every terrible thing he had ever put in his mouth. She hung fresh linens that smelled of lavender and sunshine. In return, Silas worked harder than he had in years. He fixed the leaking roof. He repaired the broken fence rails. He built a proper hen house so Clara could have fresh eggs. Every nail he drove felt like a promise. Every board he sawed felt like proof that he could be more than the man he had been. Evenings were the hardest. They sat by the fire, a polite distance between them, neither quite sure how to bridge the gap. Clara would read from her Bible or mend shirts with careful stitches. Silas would clean his guns or work leather until his fingers ached. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the flickering light, and he would feel something stir deep inside his chest. Something he had long believed was dead. It was nearly a month before the walls between them began to crumble. A storm rolled in from the north one evening, swallowing the Wyoming sky in a wall of gray. Winds screamed against the house, rattling windows and howling through every crack. The temperature plummeted, until frost formed on the inside of the glass. They worked together to bring in extra wood, to check the animals, to secure everything that might blow away. By the time they returned to the warmth of the fire, both were exhausted and half frozen. Clara prepared blankets near the hearth, and Silas understood without asking that the bedrooms would be too cold tonight. As they settled into the flickering warmth, Clara began to talk. She told him about her first husband, Thomas, about the wedding night that had been neither gentle nor patient, about the years of fear and pain that followed, about the relief she had felt when death finally took him, and the guilt that had haunted her ever since. Silas listened without interruption. When she finished, when the tears had dried on her cheeks and her voice had steadied, he took her hands in his. "Clara May Henderson," he said softly, "I will never be that man. I will never raise a hand to you. I will never rush you or force you or make you feel afraid. You set the pace. You say what is allowed and what is not. I will honor that until my dying breath." She looked at him then with eyes that held 1,000 unspoken words, and slowly, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, hesitant, warm, and when she pulled back, there was something new in her expression, something that looked remarkably like hope. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the little ranch house, two wounded hearts finally began to heal. They had come together as strangers, bound by circumstance and desperation. But in that moment, wrapped in firelight and the promise of something more, they became something else entirely.